Welcome to Brick by Brick, a podcast produced by Move Your Mind, committed to changing the construction industry, one conversation at a time. There are endless issues surrounding mental health in companies. When comparing industry rates of mental illness, the construction industry sticks out like a sore thumb. 77% of employees say they've experienced burnout in their current job. At best, mental health issues lead to more sick days and reduce company productivity. At worst, it can lead to an increased risk of suicide, with the construction industry having a suicide rate 4.5 times higher than the general public. This needs to change. I want to thank Haydn Masters for taking the initiative and joining me today to raise awareness on the issue and to share his insights as a leader in the construction industry. Haydn's the head of Health and Wellbeing at Built. I want to also say a huge thank you to Lendlease for sponsoring this podcast. Haydn, thanks so much for making the time. You're our second guest on the Move Your Mind construction series, so really appreciate it. You're really excited to learn about your story and have another conversation about mental health in this industry. So yeah, thank you for making the time.
No worries, pleased to be here, Nick.
Appreciate it. So I guess to start with, are you able to give a background on yourself and what you're now doing?
Yeah, sure. Nick, I was working in a completely different industry, which was the sports industry. I was lucky enough to work for 20 years in rugby union and rugby league in Australia, overseas in England and in Japan as well, finishing up a career with the Australian rugby union team, the Wallabies. I was the head of strength and conditioning for the 2015 World Cup and beyond. Got to the point in my career where it was having, impact on my mental health. I started to get pretty bad anxiety. I was working in a high stress, high pressure environment, high demand on results, 7 days a week, 14, 15 hour days. And it was time to get out, 5 months away from my family. Every year was very demanding. My mental health was suffering. So for me, my transfer was always going to be to corporate health and wellbeing, because I've got so much to offer in that coaching world that I could transfer across. And it just happened to be that my opportunity came to meet with Marco Rossi, who's the head of Built, which is the construction company here in Australia. And we chatted and we put down a plan, and I now work as the head of health and wellbeing for Built. I've been there for just short of 4 years. And literally we are in the process of trying to, create a new way forward for the industry, especially in health and wellbeing.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And I think there's so much even in just what you said there. I guess like burnout is across the board, such a huge topic. Is that something that I guess in the construction industry, but more broadly as well, that you've seen and are seeing as being a big issue that we need to try and look further into?
Yeah, Nick, it's a massive issue, across the board, not only in, working in the construction industry, but just people in general. The not understanding the stresses, not understanding how to deal with the stresses in our life, our lifestyle choices, the impact that lack of sleep has on that, the lack of time to do the things we enjoy, which are really critical to our mental health, our physical health as well. Not eating well. There's just the demands of our life are huge. And throw in COVID, throw in inflation, throw in interest rates, throw in everything that's coming to us. In Australia, floods and all this sort of stuff that's coming. It's a very difficult time, and I think the more we can have these discussions around burnout, around stress and managing our stress, the better people will be firstly aware that these things are actually normal, that if we don't actually action these things, that they will come and bite us. But it's okay to put your hand up. And that's probably, I think the biggest change that we're seeing at the moment. Through COVID, one of the great things was a lot more connectivity with people having conversations about mental health and burnout. And that's definitely one of the huge things that we're dealing with every day in society.
Absolutely. No, I think that's really well said. And it is, there's so much more conversation about it. And I think, which is fantastic. That's a big thing that has come out of COVID. And a lot of people were suffering to the point where they had to speak up, and it broke down a lot of those barriers. And I think, as the two of us were talking about before we started this interview, probably the next step now is, it's great that these conversations, there's knowledge out there, but how can we actually start to make these practical changes? Because we can have all the knowledge in the world, but if we don't actually do things on a daily basis, we're going to fall into the same patterns and burn out, and not get the benefits and not have the sustainability that we're all striving to find.
Yeah, that's exactly the point, and that's, I think, if I can talk about Built in particular, about what we're trying to do, is we're on a process of for 4 years now, I've been progressively building up our programs there that we can do to try and do exactly that. Like, we need to build awareness around these things, and that comes from events, that comes from days like Are You OK Day. It comes from Mental Health Awareness Month, which is right now, October. Other sort of awareness programs around that. But then what we need to do is we need to foster curiosity. We need to actually get people interested in their mental health, and the way we can do that is through education. We can do that through practical workshops, which we're doing at Built. We have a program called Built to Finish Stronger, which is our site-based health and wellbeing programs. And build into all those things is those, fostering curiosity around, their mental health, their physical health, giving people experiences like meditation, like breathing sessions, exercise options, things that are available to our people online. And then potentially off the back of that, programs that allow people to build new habits, to build it into their routines. And the only way we can do that is by getting people to understand the importance of those things, deliver a program that gives them some curiosity, and then we deliver a program that allows them to build on those habits. Things like, we have a program called Built Fit to Give, which is a program where we have involved our social impact through charity, through giving, with also the things like the City to Surf's 10-kilometre fun runs and things where our members join up, our staff join up. We have an 8-week training program that builds. So for beginners who have never run before, they can start from scratch. They can run in groups. They can socially connect with their work colleagues. And at the same time, they can raise money for the charities that are aligned to our social impact strategy. And so far, the feedback from those things has been enormous. We've got people who have never run 10 kilometres before are now keen to run a half marathon. So that's that process of building up regular habits, and that's what we're trying to do. And it happens across the board, both with meditation, mindfulness, and programs that we run.
That's fantastic. And I guess it's, a lot of the barrier normally is, it's a big job to sort of start integrating these changes, and to keep, when there's all these other things going on, how do we actually put the effort in and make sure that we get people joining these programs? But when they do it, you see the benefit. And has it been something that, I guess, since you came on and seeing where things are now, have you guys seen a big benefit out of doing this for the employees in Build?
Well, it's interesting you say that, Nick, because literally COVID stopped us having face-to-face connection, for so long. I mean, it cancelled all the events for 2 years that we're on, things like City to Surf hadn't run for 3 years here in Sydney. It's the largest, I think it's the largest fun run in the Southern Hemisphere, if not maybe the world, where there's 65, 70,000 people turn up. And we had a crew of about 75 people from our Sydney area and New South Wales area that joined that. We trained together, we connected together, we finished the race together, we sat down and enjoyed each other's company after that. And it's raving, the amount of people that have already come up and said we're doing that again next year, and the amount of people that are saying I'm going to do that next year is huge. So we've run those now. I think the Melbourne Marathon was last weekend, and we had a group of about 45 down there from the company. So, we're getting traction in those sorts of things, and there's no doubt it does bring people together. And I think where we need to change is, yes, we can get people who are usually fit and usually do those things to do those no worries. It's now the challenge is to get those people who say they're too busy, that they're not, they haven't got time, blah, blah, blah. It's now time for us to try and convert those people. And I think through social connection, through enjoyment, that's how we do that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And it's always the question, how do we do it? And, but like you're saying, those are some of the key things. Are there things that further things you're looking to put in place to try and get the broader sort of community, the broader, employees in the company doing these sort of behavior change?
Well, I mean, look, one of the really unbelievable strategies that Built's brought in the last, I suppose, year is our social impact, like programs, and we have a large focus on volunteering as well. And so part of Built's, I suppose I could call it, health and wellbeing policies and social impact strategies is around offering people the opportunity to volunteer their time during work hours to go off and that's aligned to some of our charities. And, people, sign up for that voluntarily, and the take up on that is huge. Like people are like, wow, like giving your time and giving is one of the, fabulous mental health strategies we can integrate into our lives, whether it's, just doing something small for someone or taking a day out of your busy life and giving. And so there's a very large push in that area as well. It doesn't need to be physical. It doesn't need to be about your physical health. It can be about your mental health. And so, the company's taken a really, really great view that we've got lots of opportunities for people to decide on the way that they'd like to give and the way they'd like to contribute to society and to the wellbeing culture of the company.
I love that. And there's no one size fits all, and it's such a good message, it really does. And it's sort of often the last thing we feel like doing when we're overwhelmed to go and give back, but it's profound how much of an impact that makes. So I guess it's this experiential sort of thing that when you do take that first step and do it, you realize the benefits, and then you're more likely to do it more. So it's sort of just getting from that point A to then, going and taking that first step, I think, is the hardest.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. Like it's giving people opportunities in the broad spectrum to be involved in things that they'd like to do, and then giving them the opportunity to follow on with those things after they've experienced them. And that's where that building change occurs.
Exactly. In the construction industry as a whole, what's your view on mental health in that industry, on, I guess, what is being done and probably what needs to be done moving forward?
Look, I think there's a really great opportunity in an industry that's probably rife with stigma around mental health problems, an industry that's very much male dominated, so it's a tough blokey sort of environment, very similar to the environment I came out of sport, in rugby, rugby and rugby league, very blokey, you didn't really talk up about your mental health. But I think there's a great opportunity. I know that we have some of our senior executive team at the moment working on some of these working committees around psychological safety, which mental health obviously is a huge component. Talking about, flexible hours, talking about, flexible working arrangements, the environment, the culture, all those sorts of things, bullying, harassment, like all those sorts of things are tied in. What I can honestly say is that since I've been there, it's become, and this is, I can only really speak for Built, is that there's been a large push on mental health awareness since I've been there. Our programming and our policies really direct us to that. Yes, I think there's a long way to go in flexible working arrangements. The industry is rife with a culture of long working hours, and it's not sustainable in regards to, burnout. Staff at the moment, where there's critical shortages in staff, in resources available across probably all industries, but the construction industry in particular. And so managing our assets that are our people to thrive, or the term we like to use now, flourish, and really, really enjoy what they're doing, and have a meaningful purpose. I think that's the key thing. the work-life balance thing is going to be an issue, but it will be addressed through these working groups that are working on these sorts of things at a government level. It'll filter down and it will have a big impact.
Yeah. And I think it's also an education on, like you're saying, yes, some of that does need to change with work-life balance. And if you're working crazy hours, you can't sustain it. But there's also a lot of positives about working in the construction industry. And I think there needs to be education about that as well, because I think a lot of people are, just looking for, okay, what's next? What's a different job I can do? What's a better job where, there's so many benefits of working in the industry, and we've got too much choice now, or perceived choice, when it's not actually, potentially an option. We can look at too many places. So I think it's, that's another part of it.
I agree with what you said there, Nick, about the positives of the construction industry. I mean, it's one of the largest employees, if not the largest employee in Australia of people. And, the people I deal with at Built, they love their job. They love what they do. They love the stress. They love the pressure. They love the delivery. They deliver good products. And I think, you're right. Like it is an industry that has got a stigma attached to it around, being a hard industry. It's a dirty industry, like you're working in environments. But for the part, most people I speak to really love what they do. So, there is a lot of positives. I mean, who wouldn't at the end of the day? I could tell you a story that our CEO told us recently. One of the clients in one of our jobs in the Sydney CBD was walking up the street, and he was walking past one of our sites, or his sites, and one of our workers was there with his child, like young kid, and he was like pointing to his shirt. And then he was pointing to the crane, and he was pointing to the shirt and saying, that's what we're doing. That's who I work for. And he was really proud and really, great. And that client told Brett the story, and he said, but that's what you guys are about. Like, you love what you do. And so very much so, very positive industry.
Lendlease is proudly sponsoring the Brick by Brick podcast. They're committed to the health and safety of their people and those they work with, and have been acknowledged externally for their focus on providing healthy workplaces. Lendlease is certified as a globally healthy workplace in recognition of their focus on employee health and well-being. In addition, Lendlease won the multinational employer category at the 6th Global Healthy Workplace Awards. They have a holistic approach to health and well-being and continue to grow their focus around mental health. Lendlease genuinely care and are out there not just to make a difference in their organisation, but in construction and society as a whole. We're very proud to have Lendlease as a sponsor of the Brick by Brick podcast. I love that. And we actually had a very similar story in the first episode of this series, and it was about, pointing to a building, and, we built that. And I think, that's more valuable than ever these days as well, when so many things in the world are intangible, like being in an industry where there's a physical component. We actually built this thing. We go, you go there, you're on site, you're creating this actual, tangible thing. It's definitely, something really important in that. And I think something to be proud of. So I think it's, a really, really important point. So you've come from the sporting industry, you're now in the construction world. What for yourself, what do you do to manage your own well-being, to sort of keep balance in life? how do you manage that?
I've got to practice what I preach. Well, it was only probably 4 years ago that I started meditating. And I was one of these people who's guilty of thinking that my physical health, bashing myself in the gym, like really trying to, like, eating well, I thought that was all I needed to really do to keep my mental health in line. And I kind of researched, and I went, well, no, it's not. There's so much more out there. And during the process of my transition, I had really bad anxiety. I went and saw a counsellor, and we sat down, and I was away 5 months a year. So you think about when I come home, and the kids and my wife and everything, it's like, well, hang on, you're not going to go and play, golf or go surfing because you've been away. Even though they were encouraging, and it was my perception that I shouldn't do those things. And they were the things that I needed to do. They were the things I needed to do. So look, I'm routinely like meditating once or twice a day. because I know the value that places on my ability to do the things that I want to do, my enjoyment, settling down my nervous system. That's huge for me. Even if it's just 5 minutes of breath work, hugely important. I surf, and I surf regularly. Like we'll just come away from 5 days of being up the coast, and all my kids are surfing, and that's what I really make time for when I get to the weekend, when I get to like summer and it's daylight saving, making sure that if it's worthwhile, I can get in the water. But there's also the factors around exercise. That's one of my stresses. Meaningful purpose, like I have a great job, I love what I do. That's a huge factor for me, and I love social connection. So making sure that whenever I'm at work, it's kind of different, but I'm in health and wellbeing, and people look for me to be a positive part of their day. So all of my habits, like going to bed, sleeping well, sleep hygiene, making sure that I'm not drinking a lot of alcohol, avoiding a lot of caffeine, they all go to the person that I want to be when I go to work, which is you and I. Next, sit down for 5 minutes and you walk away having a positive experience with me. And that's how I like to have everything, and that's when I know I've got balance. When I do my programs, I walk away with satisfaction knowing that I've helped someone, whether it's one person out of 10 in a group, it doesn't matter. It's that, but it's all around that holistic approach, meditation, getting out there and doing the things I love, catching up with my mates, spending time with the family, one-on-one time with my wife, with my kids, because that gives me the opportunity to really engage in what they're doing, and just minimizing the harm. I think that's probably, like no one's perfect. And I can promise you right now that I'm not perfect, but it's that minimizing the harmful things that we know are causing issues, in society, in our life, alcohol, spending too much time on social media, not respecting your bedtime, all those sorts of things I'm really quite, strict about.
Yeah, I love everything you said there. And I think what you're saying about this holistic approach and just find, there's no one size fits all. Everything's different for each individual, but it's not about, I think there can be a misconception as well that I'm stressed or I'm going through a really difficult period with my mental health. What can I do to just get through this? And then once you get through that period, then thinking, okay, it's all good again. I can just, stop doing all the things that got me there. But it's really a lifelong process, and incorporating, like what you're talking about in your own life, incorporating all of these things into the one thing. You work, you find your purpose at work. Outside of work, you have time with the family, you go surfing and do things that are good for yourself, exercising, meditating. It's not one thing, it's a combination of all these different things that work together. And, we're not going to ever get it perfect, and we shouldn't be aiming for that, but it's having that holistic balance that you're talking about, I think, is such an important message.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think one of the points that you just made, Nick, about, what do I do when I'm stressed? I go off and I meditate, and then my stress levels goes down and I stop doing it. It can be, you can find sometimes it's a bit laborious, so I like to go out and find new things, like I just did a breath workshop with a guy that does hypno breath work, totally outside of, stuff I've done before, but that was sort of an amazing experience as well. So I think, like, not only do you have to just follow the mainstream stuff, but you can go outside and learn new things. There's so much stuff on offer for your mental health, for your physical health, that it's really just opening up your imagination to what you'd like to do.
I couldn't agree more. So we finish every episode we've just got 5 closing questions. I don't know if you've heard these before. They're nothing too crazy, though. I'm not going to throw you too far in the deep end here. They're all mental health sort of related.
Okay.
So the first one is, what's your best childhood memory that comes to mind?
Far out. That's, you are throwing me under the bus a little bit there.
They'll get easy.
No. I've got one. Well, like I was blessed. I grew up in Manly, on Manly Beach here in Sydney, and I just remember my childhood memories were just out in the surf with my mates. Like being a young kid. It's 8 o'clock at night. We've been down the beach since 7:30 in the morning doing, nippers and, life saving and that sort of stuff. And it's 8 o'clock at night and it's still beautiful down there. And I'm out there with 3 or 4 mates, sun's going down, and that's my peaceful place.
Oh, it's such a beautiful place, such an amazing
Mm.
place to grow up. Yeah, I love Manly.
Oh, blessed, mate. I've been blessed.
It's amazing. What do you think is the biggest burden on mental health in society at the moment?
I think it's just still the stigma, like and it's not so much, I don't think, the stigma that people, think are, is so much around what people think. It's the stigma around what we think other people think. That's
Yeah,
the most challenging thing at the moment is, like we have to stop thinking that people are going to judge us because we have a mental health issue. And I think one of and just to expand on that question, it's the definition of mental health, which I think is really probably creating a lot more of that stigma. Like we have mental health, and mental health's not a great sort of way to describe, I've got poor mental health, I've got bad or good mental health. And then there's mental illness, which is people who are diagnosed with a condition that actually affects their mental health, in a different way. It's a pathological thing. So
yeah,
what I like to look at is, there's an author by the name of Corey Keyes, and he's a positive psychologist. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, Nick, but he came up with what's called the mental health continuum. And it's
yes,
basically one end of the continuum is languishing, which is like basically you're in a hole, like you're unmotivated, you can't get things done. Things are not working for you. And the other end, we have flourishing, where everything's going great. And everyone needs to know that we are on a moving part of that continuum all the time. We don't just sit in the middle and go, or sit at the flourishing and go, this is great. Things happen in our life to take us between languishing and flourishing and vice versa. And so we need to recognize that. We need to recognize there are tough times in our life, and that there are resources available for us and people to speak to help us learn how to flourish.
absolutely. And I actually use that continuum as an example a lot of the time, and I've done it in a lot of my presentations. And I think it's like you're saying, there's such a great simple way to be able to show, the extremes of this whole area. So yeah, really like that answer. Yeah. What would you say is your personal definition of happiness?
Where everything's going well, where everything's where I'm, in terms of happiness, is where I can come home every day knowing that I've done everything in my power to be myself, to actually, give people the resources and things that they need at work, but then also to give my family and myself what I need to flourish. That's my definition of happiness.
Love it. I've got two more here.
Yep.
What are you most afraid of?
It's interesting. When I used to, before I used to meditate and I went through a personal growth, I used to be most afraid of failure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not afraid of failure anymore. I see failure as a learning opportunity. I see the downtimes as an opportunity to grow. COVID is a great example of even though, there was misery in the world and it had such a negative impact on the world, families and stuff. But if you look at the things that we developed in COVID and the way that we're able to adjust our work life, we socially connected in a different way. We had so much more care and value to our community and stuff. I think, we can prepare for those things better. And so what I'm most afraid of is that the people in the world just continue to go on the way they are, oblivious to what we need to do to flourish.
Yeah, no, great answer. And again, I agree with you in what you're saying with the failure part. I think, to look at failure as, it's not failure, it's actually learning. We actually learn more when we fail. So when you have that mindset, then you can't get as overwhelmed, because you sort of, whatever you're approaching, you're either going to get sort of the result you're aiming for, or if it doesn't go your way, you're like, okay, great, what can I learn from this? And that's how we grow. So I think it's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, and I have, like that, just in line with that question there. I the first place I look at people not flourishing is my social my mates, my families and stuff. And so, I look at that and I look at, I'm 48 years old this year, Nick, and I look around me and I'm like, wow, so many of my friends are not going the right way. mentally, physically, whatever it may be. So my biggest fear is that people don't start to, take accountability for those things.
Absolutely, because it's the most important thing. It really is.
Absolutely
got to be aware of these things, and exactly, not let it get out of hand.
Yeah.
So, final one. What are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of my family. I think that's what I do everything for. I've got a beautiful wife. I've got 3 great kids. And everything that I do in life, I do for them. I'm proud of my career. I achieved my career goals in rugby union. That was amazing. So for me, my focus is on my family, and I'm really proud of them because of who they are and how we are together.
Appreciate it, mate, and thank you so much for making the time. And one final thing, where for everyone listening, we'll put this in the show notes as well, but where can they go if they want to learn more about Built?
I think you can go to our website, built.com.au. It's we've got a lot of presence on social media, on LinkedIn. But there's no doubt you can learn a lot about a great company by going to our website, having looked through. There's a lot of information on there on our employment value program, about recruitment and retention, and the amazing projects that we're doing at the moment. So please, www.built.com.au.
Great. Well, we'll put the link to the website and the social links in the show notes for anyone listening. And Haydn, thank you again for making the time. Really appreciate it. I've taken a lot out of this, and I think our listeners are going to, get a lot out of this interview. So I appreciate you making the time to do it.
My pleasure, Nick. Thanks for chatting.
Thanks so much, mate.
Thanks to Haydn Masters for joining me today for Brick by Brick.